hello. Okay, wanted to make sure I'm working right in both spaces. Hello. Hope everybody's having a grand evening. Hi, DeGray. I need to. I'm going to have a Discord link up on the link tree, so that people can actually get into the Discord as well. Okay, which I'm still learning. But I'm also going to be able to stream over there. So I will have that up. So if you're looking for the Discord link, it will be in the link tree in my bio. Happy New Year's, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. We're going to do our second episode of our first part of our Neanderthals tonight. And what we're talking about tonight, like we were talking about the last live, and like we'll be talking about the next two lives, is the other species that we see through the genetics of Neanderthals, and some of the interbreeding possibilities and things like that with Neanderthals. This is Homo neanderthalis behind me. And also, we will. In all my setup, I forgot my drink. Give me 2 hot seconds here, real quick. I apologize about that. Okay, so we're going to talk about the other species that we see within Homo neanderthal, and we're going to talk about language within Neanderthal as well. And we'll be doing 4 lives on this all this week. We did one Friday AM. We're doing this Wednesday or Sunday PM, and then we'll be doing a Tuesday AM at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and a Wednesday PM at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Will be the other 2 lives on this subject, and then we will be moving into art and jewelry within Homo neanderthalis. And we're going to just be going over those couple things tonight. If this is your first time in my chat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the comments, which will be turned back on later on. But it makes it easier for everybody involved. Especially because people comment the weirdest fucking shit in the world. I never get it. Anyways, the picture behind me is Tom Borkland. Tom Borkland is an artist that you can find on Insta and Twitter, I think. And I've got some links to him in my link tree in my bio. He makes some beautiful Neanderthal art. One of my prior profile pictures was his. This is not the one I currently have now, but one of my prior profile pictures was his, and he's pretty amazing. He does recreations of Neanderthals artistically that are very much human. And for me, it is important when I impart old human species to you, for you to be able to see just how intensely human our ancestors are. We are talking about species who have great advancements, and every advancement that you have is built on the advancements that they themselves made. When we talk about Homo erectus, when we talk about the species that Homo erectus speciated into, we talk about how Homo erectus invents the ability to carry, husband, take care of, control fire. And this is a scientific process of I observe in nature and I have a hypothesis, and then I predict based on that hypothesis, and then I test my prediction. And then if those tests prove true, becomes a theory that I retest every time I do that again, right? Every time I light the fire again, every time I nap a new tool again, I'm retesting it, right? So what we see with that is that with Homo erectus having fire, and Homo erectus being able to cook food, Homo erectus bringing out our first clothing, all of these different things, we see that a lot of the basis of everything that we have today is built on Homo erectus. And it is the same for Homo neanderthalis. Homo neanderthalis descends from Homo erectus. Well, Homo heidelbergensis, the subspecies of Homo erectus, is the parent species of a Homo neanderthalis, just like it is the parent species of us. And we see that Homo neanderthalis gets these inherited things from Homo erectus as well. They get fire, they get the ability to do clothing, they get the ability to travel across water. They get all of these little abilities, though we don't see a whole lot of traveling across water in Homo neanderthalis like we do with Homo erectus. Um, with this, what we see is that by the time we come onto the scene at 300,000 years ago, Homo neanderthalis is already 300,000 years old. So, as old as we are today, by the time we come onto the scene, Homo neanderthalis lives for about 570,000 years, is our current guesstimate. By our different dating methods that we have, we see that our last found Neanderthal currently is 30,000 years old. Things change in science and things change in archaeology all the time, especially right now with all of these new scientific tools that we have that are really pushing us forward. But we see that we're currently dating them as far back as 600,000 years ago. That could push back. It just pushed back last year from 500,000 years ago to 600,000 years ago. So as we look at these things and as we know that this is fluid a little bit and it will change, we see that this broad, long lived species, oh, that's pretty, thank you. This broad, long lived species actually kind of dominates their environment in their time. A lot of times we want to think, well, why did they die and we lived? Well, it's not like that. They lived longer than we've lived, right? Some of the really cool new finds that we have with the new genetic testing that we're able to do with ancient DNA. Pablo Sponte Pablo is the guy who just won the Nobel Peace Prize for his work with ancient genomic testing, right? And he was able to find a full genome of a Neanderthal with his polymerase chain reaction invention, PCR. And he comes from the Max Planck Institute. And the Max Planck Institute has been churning out all of these new abilities with scientific testing, including a kind of soil testing that's almost like the carbon 14 soil testing that we do, and also including this new ability to look at the genetics of a being and figure out what they looked like map their nostrils and stuff like that, right? Um, so with that, we understand that ancient DNA is something that really is anything that's been, I consider it like dead like 50 years. I've heard some people say if it's dead, it's ancient, but I would say like 50 years. Anything prior to that is ancient, and that's because the rate that DNA degrades can be really quick depending on the circumstances it's in. And so this is why it took us so long to get to the point that we were able to test Neanderthal and the other ancient humans that we've been able to actually get DNA from, like Denisovian. But in our testing of Neanderthal and Denisovian, we found out some really cool shit in their DNA. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. One of the things that we found within their DNA is that they almost went extinct twice. This new DNA testing that allows us to select like cores of soil and sample and DNA test that gives the ability to actually kind of map the genomics of the Neanderthals over a broad time and see where their population had wider genomics and narrower genomics and wider genomics again. And so with that ability to map it through time, hey Druids, with that ability to map it through time, we're seeing that Neanderthals started out with a very wide genomic and then almost went extinct a couple of times. And it appears during one of these almost extinction periods, they lost their Y DNA. And whether they replaced their Y DNA with Homo sapien Y DNA, and that's why we can't find Neanderthal Y DNA, or they just lost their Y DNA and no longer needed Y DNA for their procreation needs, which currently we know of two species on the planet that are mammalian that do not need Y DNA for procreation. And currently, as Homo sapiens, we are losing our Y DNA. And so it might be very soon that we do not need Y DNA for procreation. Um, so if it is that they lost their Y DNA, that would be an interesting thought experiment. Um, and if it is that they replaced it, it's also a very interesting thought experience because what it tells us is that as their men were dying off, why were their men dying off? They were mixing with the Homo sapien men that they found in this space at the time, right? Um, but we don't really find Homo sapien, so it tells us that they would be down in the Levant earlier than we thought because we don't really see Homo sapien finds in the spaces prior, right? So it leads to a lot of other questions as well, which are really going to be a cool deep dive over the next couple of years. Um, as we're looking at that, we're also looking at the fact that there are several other species that we haven't found a full genomic spectrum of. We call these ghost species. We find these species in the DNA of us in Neanderthal and Denisovian, but we don't find it in the fossil record yet, right? We find Neanderthal and Denisovian in the fossil record, but they're the only two archaic human DNAs that we have in the fossil record. So they're the only two archaic human DNAs that have a full genome of, right? The ones that we see in ourselves and how we see Neanderthal and Denisovian in ourselves is this little slip, this little flush, this little piece of their DNA strand is in ours. It's a fingerprint of their DNA within ours. It is not the whole genomic spectrum. And so we can't see who the whole being is without that full genomic spectrum. So we're seeing recently there's a find that came across that says that we're looking at another 4 species. A comparison of a high quality genome sequence of a 50,000-year-old Neanderthal woman with those of modern humans and Denisovians reveals a long history of interbreeding among at least 4 species of early human beings. So that's giving at least one other that we're not seeing. Though there's another that we see in Neanderthal and Denisovian that we don't see in us. So there's another that we're not seeing. And then we have the other ghost species that we see, which currently we see 5 ghost species in us that we haven't found within the fossil record. The other thing is that we're starting to take a different look at other finds. There is the Banyoles from Girona, Spain. Apologies if I mispronounce. Though it is colonizer language. So this mandible is in 1887. And the key aspects of this is that this mandible, for all intents and purposes, seems to be Homo sapien, except for one thing. It doesn't have the mental eminence that every Homo sapien has. The teeth, the placement, the way that it is, everything else about it seem to be Homo sapien. There are no derived Neanderthal characteristics, so no characteristics that belong to Neanderthal alone, right? So there's no evidence that this is Neanderthal. But the only thing, like the one thing that Homo sapien has that nothing else has, like when it comes to skeletal morphology, is the mental eminence, right? This is the one thing that really sets us apart. And if it's a Homo sapien bone, it doesn't have that. So could it be a hybrid of 2 species? It could be, but which 2 species? Because it has no Neanderthal derived characteristics. So this gives evidence of either an interesting interbreeding with maybe Denisovian or something, or it could be a whole other species that we're getting an intermix with. And then we don't have DNA on this. And my understanding from what I'm reading is that the likelihood of getting DNA is going to be slim, and like there's not going to get it on this. best idea is to find another mandible that has these characteristics and be able to DNA test that mandible, get DNA from that mandible, and then be able to compare the two. I do know that the Denisovian mandible that we have does not seem to share derived characteristics with this either. Though I do know that the Denisovian mandible that we have um, doesn't seem to have a whole lot of individualistic characteristics either. Like it seems to kind of be a little bit Neanderthal, but a little bit Homo sapien. Like Neanderthal have a gap between their back teeth and the curve of their mandible, the bone of their mandible, and Denisovians don't, and we don't. Um, but it doesn't seem to have a mental eminence either. And there are some other very Neanderthal, or not Neanderthal, but yeah, very Neanderthal fit characteristics to it. Um, so I'm not sure what that's going to come out to. Like, I'm not sure if we're going to end up finding a piece that tells us this is a whole new human, or if we're going to end up finding something that gives us the idea that there is crossbreeding that we didn't know about before, right? So that could be an absolutely curious and cool thing that we're going to see as we go in. And then there's another one. I think actually we had talked about this one. Yes, this is the one where we see it within Neanderthal and Denisovians, but we do not see it within Homo sapiens, and that is one of those ghost species. With Dragon Man or Homo longi, we are looking at a skull that we're not sure yet is Neanderthal or not is Neanderthal, is um, a whole new species in and of itself, or is Denisovian? Because Denisovian, we don't have a skull of. We have a mandible, we have a small chunk of the base of their skull, and then we have very micronic, like very small fragments. Fragments. Yeah, okay. Had to make sure I said it right. And because of that, we don't have a species type or a fossil type for Denisovian. And so Homo longi, if Homo longi is able, and I think that they actually were able to state that they tried to DNA test longi, but they weren't able to get DNA from longi. And so it's going to come down to whether or not we find another skull with the characteristics of longi and DNA test of that one and come up and see that it's the same as Denisovian's DNA, or we find a Denisovian DNA skull and it matches longi. Now, if we find a Denisovian DNA skull and it does not match longi, then that completely puts longi into a whole new species. Or if we find another skull that looks like it and it doesn't match Denisovian DNA, it puts it into a whole new species. And for right now, we are calling longi a whole new species. But as we're moving forward, we're looking at whether or not many of these species are kind of mixing and interbreeding. And we're also looking at whether or not there's other species out there that we're just not there yet. We just don't know yet, right? Because we are at a period of time where there is this vast amount of information coming out because of this vast amount of advance within science. With the picture behind me with Tom Borkland, um, I know that a lot of people with the last picture as well that I had last live were stating that the picture seemed dark skinned for what we think of with Neanderthal. When we think of Neanderthal, we see a lighter skinned being overall. There's still dark skin genetics within Neanderthal. And we don't see what we think of as white. We see light comparatively. Excuse me, all of the bubblies. We see not white, but light comparison to what the dark was that you're seeing differently. So I think that that's something that needs to be understood. We're seeing Caucasian, which is North Africa and the Levant and the Mediterranean, right? So we're seeing that as your lightest. You're not seeing ultra fair. Now, we do see red hair within Neanderthal and we do see light eyes, but we don't know or see if there's a correlating. There are freckles. Freckles, though, have to do with the alleles for tanning. Um, and you can get freckles on wide ranges of skin. So I think that the lightest alleles that they're seeing are roughly slightly darker than what I would look like, right? I'm not really light. I might look like it right now with the lights, but I'm not really light. But this or slightly lighter than this in the picture behind me is what we're looking at for light, right? We're not looking at ultra, ultra light. Maybe sometimes, and occasionally, yes, right? We're just not seeing it as 90% of the population. We're seeing it as 10% of the population. Okay. So you're going to see that you're going to get that wide range of skin tone depending on where people are at, anyways. And you're going to see that in that wide range of skin tone, depending on where people are at, anyways, that the predominance is going to be towards darker skin rather than lighter skin. Which we also see within Homo sapiens until very recently. Very recently, we've talked about this one before. So we do want to understand that, and we do want to understand that you are going to see that range of skin tones. And we also want to understand this along the lines of because it was used in this way. When race theory was developed around the same time that the first discovery of Homo neanderthalis was discovered, okay? And of course, it took them a hot minute to decide that Homo neanderthalis actually wasn't just a bad morphology human being because God had created us 5,000 years ago, and the idea that something else had existed had not come into idea yet, okay? Because again, European scientists didn't know jack shit compared to scientists around the rest of the world, but we won't get into that one in this life. When we see this, and when we see that European scientists are creating the theory of race to justify the atrocities of their actions, right? We're seeing that they use Neanderthal in that. We're seeing that Neanderthal is used as a backwards, primitive, dark skinned, grunting, mid face prognosis, bent over, hunched, hairy being in associated with those who are dark skinned or might have more of a mid face prognosis. Though all still have the chin, and the mid face prognosis is a completely different style of mid face prognosis, correct? So you're seeing that early archaeology and anthropology absolutely uses this theory of race to justify their atrocities and doubles down on it with Neanderthals and doubles down on it with all the earlier Homo species that they see. Well, all of these earlier people were dark and they were all primitive. These motherfuckers weren't primitive. Start thinking of them as people who understood living in concert with nature at a higher level than you do today. They didn't leave behind the wide marks that you are leaving behind because they didn't need to dominate nature. They were a part of nature. Broad scale throughout all of history, up until the narcissistic god kings decided to create othering in cities. Okay. So please understand that it is not that these are a primitive being. Okay. And it is not a genetic advantage to be light skinned. It is, in fact, a genetic disadvantage. So it is not an evolutionary advantage because it does not apply to the species as a whole in all the places the species inhabits. Whereas dark skin is an evolutionary advantage because it applies to the species as a whole in all areas that the species inhabits. And we see this in the fact that even Homo sapiens were not light skinned in Europe on a whole, or even as half of the population until 5,000 years ago. They survived for 45,000 years in some places with dark skin as an advantage. So, nah, just to break on down on that one. I'm going to go ahead and open up for comments. If there's any questions to be had, please go ahead and ask them. I do ask, and I'm pretty particular. I do not do racism in my chat. Race theory has been debunked. It's a crock of shit. It's nasty and we're not playing with it. Also, don't do phobias based on gender and desire. Um, if that's the way you have to think, that's kind of your own ethical and moral failing. And I don't want to have to fucking deal with it and educate you tonight. So keep it to yourself. Scroll on if you need to. However, same with racism. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. The other thing is kindness is key in my space. We are kind to each other and being kind to you. And I expect kindness in return because kindness is key. And we need to remember that as a group. I'm not sure if I can do comment settings. Okay, there it is. No. I don't think I have subscriber only comments at this point. So that won't be turned back on. I'm not sure why. The live is about Neanderthal currently. So there's a new article that's come out that's talking about Homo sapiens are losing their Y DNA. Oh, did I shut that one down? It's not really part. Oh, wait, there it is. Hold on. The Y chromosome is slowly vanishing. A new sex gene could be the future of men. The sex of human and other mammal babies is decided by a male determining gene on the Y chromosome, but the Y chromosome is degenerating and may disappear in a few million years, so not really soon, leading to our extinction unless we evolve a new sex gene. The good news is 2 branches of rodents have already lost their Y chromosome and lived to tell the tale. And then it goes into everything else. But what it's talking about is that there's so few genes within the Y chromosome, and it's a lot of non-coding DNA. It's really obsolete. And then they're kind of losing, like, well, infertility is rising among males, right? Um, and we're kind of losing the need of that master sex gene. We don't have jaw gaps in Homo sapiens. It's Neanderthals that have jaw gaps. We have a lack of a jaw gap. We have our teeth go up against the back of our bone. Currently, we know about 12 hominins who are living all at the same time. The population of Neanderthal over the entirety of their species was about 500,000. We know that they were around for about 570,000, 600,000 years, and the entire whole of their species over the entirety of that time is 500,000 is what we're seeing through their DNA. There are a few different Neanderthal traits that brought their genetic dominance to Homo sapiens. And there are some genes that we get from Neanderthal for like different medical things. Um, but everybody except for the Oyo population, the Khoisan populations in Africa have Neanderthal DNA. Everybody on the fucking planet, all of us, all of us, all of us. You are Norwegian, blonder, fair, and blue eyes. Can I explain why? Yes, because it takes 100 generations or 2,500 years for a species to adapt. 2,500 years in our species, because that's how many years per 25 years per generation is what they average it as. So, roughly 5,000 years ago, half the population of Europe, Northwest Europe, becomes fair, right? And then, and kind of like fairer, right? And then another 2,500 years, and then the population becomes pretty fair. And you're looking at, at 2,000 years ago, maybe um, 70 to 80% of the population. And then at 1,000 years ago, 90% of the population is fair because even in the sagas, Egil's dark. A lot of the population is still dark. I'm not sure if men will disappear. I'm not sure. Um, maybe that gene will change into something else. Genetics isn't my big thing. Like, I don't understand genetics enough to really get into genetics. I just find it to be a cool, like, okay, so what does this mean? And this is what we're looking at. What does that mean, right? You could have the lesbian world you dreamed of as a child. How old is mankind? 300,000 years old for Homo sapiens. The first Homo species is 2.5 million years ago. Suns aren't going to die off, I promise. So we have 6 of them that we found in the fossil record of the 12 hominids, and then we have 6 ghost species. I do go over it in our lives on Homo erectus, but I'm trying to do lives on Neanderthal tonight, for the next couple weeks. 2 mammals with no Y are both rodents. It doesn't say what rodents they are. 2 branches of rodents. I think that is all. Erectus didn't live alongside us. We more descended from them, but otherwise, Ducret has it right. Sapien, Denisovian, Neanderthal, Longi, Florensis, Lozonsis. And, oh, okay, you have no lot in there. Ice age. We have so many different ice ages. The Earth goes through global warming and cooling phases, and we end up in ice ages all the time. Um, the last ice age didn't recede completely from Scandinavia until like 8,000 years ago. I am not teaching eugenics. I am extremely anti-eugenics, and actually, I have been working to debunk eugenics for fucking decades. Eugenics is nasty, and we gave it to fucking Hitler. We do know how intelligent Neanderthal were. Okay, so uh the most amazing single fact that I could tell us about human ancestors. I'm going to end on that question. I'm going to turn these off. It doesn't allow me tonight to allow subscribers only. I'm not sure why. Usually I do that. The most single amazing thing is Neanderthals using fire. Yes, Neanderthals did have technology. If you like, I am on YouTube. You can comment over there. And Widda Ord without the periods. God, soon I'll be without the periods and that'll be grand. Anyways, so Homo erectus has the ability to either create or husband or keep fire, right? And it is this that gives them the ability to cook their food. And when you can cook your food, you pre-digest your food. And when you pre-digest your food, you get a greater caloric intake from a smaller amount of food, which means that in the times when all excess calories go to brain development, the times of our lives in utero and our early childhood and up until our, well, in us currently today, 25 is when our brain stops developing and the frontal lobe finishes closing, blah, blah, blah. So, when we look at that, having that extra caloric intake, especially in fatty caloric intake during that time period, gave Homo erectus the ability to give their children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, great great grandchildren, Homo sapien, Homo Neanderthal, the larger brains that they had. They also use this to be able to give us the shape of our brains because Homo naledi had the shape of our brains when we didn't have the shape of our brains, when our shape was like Neanderthalis. And it is the shape of the brain that is actually the advancement. And Homo naledi, descending from Homo erectus, gets the gene from that shape or for that shape for their brains. And we get that same gene. And it takes a while longer for us to develop the shape than it does for Homo naledi, and therefore to get to the technological advancement that we're at now. But all of these things are because Homo erectus learned how to control fire. And it is the learning of controlling a fire that gives them the brain development. So, in essence, it is the science of Homo erectus because the learning to control fire is actual science Again, I observe in nature, I have a hypothesis, I predict what it means, I test it, and when the test proves true, it becomes a theory. Each test of lighting or keeping the fire is proving the test true. And when it fails, I go back to my hypothesis and develop a new testing until I get it again. This is all science, right? So, Homo erectus scientifically created Homo sapiens brains. That is, for me, the biggest, coolest fucking thing in the world. That Homo erectus scientifically creates Homo sapiens brain structure. The reason that we are the vastly intelligent being that we are is because we were absolutely scientifically created. Just wasn't ancient aliens, wasn't an ancient apocalypse, wasn't aliens from another planet, wasn't the Anunnaki. We were scientifically created by Homo erectus. That's my favorite one. So, we've talked about kind of the other species that were around with Homo sapien or with Neanderthalis and the different things that Neanderthal DNA is telling us about them as a species. Again, we see that they start as a larger species and then they shrink down to a population collapse and then they actually get up again during a intermittent between an ice age. So we see that the ice recedes about 170,000 years ago, and we're seeing at this point that they're very population collapse at this point. And then we see that the ice comes back, but it comes back roughly like 100,000 years ago, maybe a little bit more. And we're seeing that they're at 100 and, they're going back up and they've reached a larger population size, roughly 130,000 years ago. And then they have a population collapse again at roughly 100,000 years ago. And then they go extinct as a species genomic whole at 30,000 years ago. We do know that they were with us in the Levant for 100,000 years, from 150,000 years to 50,000 years ago, that we were in two caves about 5 minutes walk from each other. And during this time, we had great advancements in tools in both species, and we bred a lot. We mixed a lot. This is where we get the vast majority of our Neanderthal DNA. And, and why we see that the vast majority of Neanderthal DNA today comes from Asia. Because as Neanderthal DNA carrying Homo sapiens are moving up out at 50,000 years ago, they're moving into the eastern portion of Eurasia first. So the Levant is here, right? You've got the Mediterranean here and it comes across, but there's like a portion of Asia down here, right? But you got to go up across the Mediterranean, all those lakes and seas and stuff, and come up where it's already ice to get over to Europe. So you're seeing that people are going into Asia first. And then after they're mixing and breeding and going back into Africa and coming back out with more and more Homo sapien DNA and leaving Neanderthal DNA in Africa, we're seeing that they then move up into Europe. And so we absolutely see that there's a higher percentage of Neanderthal DNA in Asia than there is in Europe. We also see that there is Neanderthal DNA everywhere. Everywhere, 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 everywhere. The Oyo population of West Africa and the Khoisan population of South Africa do not have Neanderthal DNA. They are the only two places, and those two places have 3 other ghost species within them. I'm not sure if it's 2 and 1 or 3 together or 1 here. I'm not positive on which ghost species we see where between these two populations, or if this shows that they were originally the same population, and then they have the same 3 species within them. But I do know that those are the only 2 populations that we have that do not have Neanderthal DNA within them. And yes, sorry, there's hair slime. Yes, there is a link tree in my bio, and yes, it has links to the sources on that and the anthropological and DNA studies that have shown this. So we see 12 species that we lived alongside. Again, 6 that we see in the fossil record and 6 that we see within us, though we are, again, coming up with new species all the time. There's a new ghost species that they're talking about in the European population that they think AI found. And I'm not sure how AI found it, so I don't really talk about it yet because I'm looking into it more. But there is, possibility that there's more ghost species out there. And so as we're looking through all of this stuff, we're seeing that the population of our planet at this period of time was very broad with very many different species, and all of those species were banging each other. All of them were having sex with each other because the way we know that six of them exist is through our DNA and through Neanderthal and Denisovian DNA, right? Five of them within us and one of them within Neanderthal and Denisovian DNA, and only because of breeding. And when two species breed and intermix, it's not like when a man and a woman have sex, most of the children are going to be fertile and pass on their genetics, right? It is like mules. It's like horses and donkeys. It's like ligers. Every great once in a while, you will get a fertile offspring. So they estimate that to get to the 0.02 to 0.03% of the or of Denisovian that they see in the Turtle Island indigenous population, that it took the Turtle Island indigenous population 10,000 years of breeding with Denisovians. 0.02 to 0.03. The highest percentage of Denisovian that we see is 6%, and the highest percentage of Neanderthal that we see is 5%. It's over 100,000 years for Neanderthal, right? And that's actually two periods they're talking about now, because they do think that either, like, we're not sure what happened with the Y DNA. Is it that it got replaced with Homo sapien Y DNA? And if it got replaced with Homo sapien Y DNA, then what that means is that they mixed with Homo sapiens before 285,000 years ago. So if that's the case, because that's when we stopped seeing stopped seeing Y DNA for Neanderthals. They, in fact, of the 18 Neanderthals that they have not found Y DNA for Neanderthal. Of the 18 that they have DNA, they have not found Y DNA yet. So this makes you go, huh, right? So with that, what we're seeing is that there's this vast culture of many different human bands that are all mixing together. And I say bands because we're not talking about familial connections all the time, right? Tribes are usually loosely based familial connections, bands are not. So you can see a band where you see, like with Homo erectus, that we consider all of them to be Homo erectus subspecies, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo ergaster, Homo rudolfensis, because they all lived in the same camps together. Maybe they were different species, they're all just living in the same bands together, right? So you are seeing that Homo neanderthalis, Homo sapien, Homo denisovian, and all of these homos, whatever that we don't know of yet that are in our DNA, are all living in the same groups, in bands, breeding, mixing, creating us, creating us, right? Through that vast, beautiful curiosity of seeing something new, seeing the humanity in it and loving it, right? Because that is what we do innately. Innately, we see the humanity in everything around us. That's why you see faces and everything. That's why people have found the Virgin Mary in toast, because innately we see humanity in everything around us. It's when we stop seeing humanity in everything around us that we reach that problematic point. I'm going to go ahead and touch on language. Let me open it back up for questions before I touch on language. And then I might have to see if I'm going to bring up something else, because that does become a little bit of not a lot of time, We did have a minor ice age, not until the 1700s, but what we had was a minor ice age that came up. I think it was like 6,000 years ago, and then receded in the 1700s. But it wasn't. So the last full-blown ice age, the last ice age ends at or starts ending at 50,000 years ago. It starts leaving Britain at 27,000 years ago. It's fully left northern Britain, so Scotland and Ireland, at 8,000 years ago. And the earliest that we know of people being in Scandinavia and when we believe it leaves Scandinavia is roughly 7,000 years ago. So I know what that means, but I can't pull it to the top of my head with the shovel teeth. Like I know that that's supposed to hit something and I can't think of what it's supposed to hit. I apologize. A lot of times it's very difficult for me to hang on to a whole bunch of information. And so I sometimes things will flop to the back of my head and not like I know that they're there, but I don't know what they mean. I think that has something to do with Homo sapiens, which I'm not really touching about Homo sapiens. So they can't find a Y chromosome in Neanderthal DNA, like a Neanderthal Y chromosome decay. Yeah, we can only find the mitochondrial. We're only finding X chromosomes. So they would have been living in Neanderthal would have been living in probably bands or groups of Homo erectus when they evolved, or Homo heidelbergensis when they evolved. Shovel teeth are a Homo sapien style of teeth, having to do with different groups of Homo sapiens. It has to do with family lines and genetics. I'm not exactly sure. I went and Googled what it was because I couldn't remember off the back, and then you were talking about, but it has to do with family lines and genetics within Homo sapiens. How do I feel about the movie Idiocracy? The same way I feel about 1984. We're living that shit and nobody's aware. I think we're living all of it, and we've been living all of it, and people write books trying to wake you up, and they couch them because you can't write a book and say it outright without ending up dead, right? So that's why all of our prophets and all of our, philosophers and why we have so many martyrs, anybody who speaks truth is usually killed, right? So they couch it as science fiction or fiction because they can't just flat out tell you you're living in the middle of Big Brother. You've been living in the middle of Big Brother for a hot minute, right? Language has always changed, language always shifts, right? But that telling you that the histories of histories didn't happen that you see within Big Brother, I mean, that's the whole whitewashing of American history, right? So you're absolutely living Big Brother here in the United States. And really, that's the colonial whitewashing of history around the globe, correct? Like the idea that nobody had science until the Renaissance, when everybody had science except for the Europeans because they followed their God and their God was jealous, right? So, so they didn't have a male chromosome, is what we're looking at. So, what it looks like is they don't have a male chromosome at a certain point. Like, there's not a genetic that gives that, and as a species, we're losing ours, right? And so it kind of makes you wonder, and we can't test that in erectus, and erectus is around for 2 million years. Did they lose theirs too? Right. And other species like rodent species have lost theirs, right? And have been fine losing theirs. It doesn't make them infertile. So whether or not it develops another, like, okay, so whether or not XXX can now breed with XX, I don't know. Whether or not we uh now look masculine and have some of the masculine interactions, but the genetics have no Y DNA within them, or, I'm not exactly sure what it means. I don't know what it means. These are recent articles, and I'm not sure they know what it means yet. Like, um, but I know like I'm not exactly sure what the ins and the outs, and I'm not going to make predictions on how we're going to lose it and what it's going to be. Um, you know, this is Neanderthal behind me, Tamara. This is Tom Borkland art. This is one of the ones I got off of his Insta. I would go and check him out. You will love him. He does some amazing artwork. And he does one of the, I don't know if I saved her. Let me see if I did. He does one of uh, the, hold on. It's going to pause me for a second. No, I didn't pull it up, but he does one on, and I'll pull it up over on my computer and show you. He takes the Venus of Wollendorf and he turns the Venus of Wollendorf into this beautiful black woman with shells braided into her hair. And I'm in love with it. It's one of my favorite pictures. Why isn't it popping up? Okay. There it is. So this is based loosely on the skull construction of the Magdalena woman, but it is the what she's wearing is based off of what they are wondering. One of the ideas of the Venus of Wollendorf's hair. I'll pull up the Venus of Wollendorf in just a moment. But this is one of his arts on the Venus of Wollendorf, which I just really love. Let me really quick pull up the Venus of Wollendorf. And I'm sorry for those on YouTube because I know that you can't see what I pulled up on TikTok. I will 1 second try and pull it up over there. I don't like how slow my phone gets and all of the stuff I have in it. I need to get rid of half of this. So sorry. I know it takes forever. So ignore the words on her. Sorry. But this is the Venus of Wollendorf, and he's thinking that this is this is one of the interpretations of this hairdo. Let me pop back up the picture that I had. And I'm going to show YouTube really quick the pictures of the Venus of Wollendorf. Okay, YouTube. It is not going to like me very much because my camera is weird. But let me see, you can see you, huh? This is the Venus of Wollendorf. Picture by Tom Borkland. And then see that I have done all of these weird things to try and make this work. I will get you an actual Venus of Wollendorf. I'm just going to pull this up and put it in YouTube so that you can take a look at this Venus. No, Prudy. Uh, I will find that in the in Turtle Island. Legends of the Lost. Is that what that is? I'll take a look at that. That looks interesting. Let's see. Um, Nice. I'll take a look at it. Did you see that they just did some LiDAR and found that the Mayans had this big, vast city in South America? Um, well, obviously, where the Mayans were. I'm so geographically challenged. And that they had this big city that predates anything else that they found with the Mayans before, like it pushes it back. There's so many different things. I need to do a couple of I need to do a couple of lives that just specifically hit on things for Turtle Island indigenous people again. Um, the White Sands footprints. Yeah, I need to do a couple of things. I found a couple more sites within Turtle Island too that are pushing back the timeline too. I need to get into, or do I just need to do a live that just does Turtle Island indigenous sites so that I can hand out some information to some people who I know need it. Ooh, okay. Yeah, I'll look pretty. That looks good. Cool. Yeah, with Turtle Island archaeology, I try and steer clear of Turtle Island stuff unless I'm just giving information, right? Like I give Turtle Island archaeological information that proves Turtle Island knowledge to be correct so that Turtle Island indigenous people have the stone to put in the sling, right? Have the arrow to put in the bow, have the weapon to have the evidence, have the this, right? And so I do some stuff on that just because I want to give people information because I want my cousins to be able to, stand their ground and speak the truth, right? Speak reality, right? Um, so with that, I do that, but I try not to do a whole lot of focus on it because also like I don't want to be teaching Turtle Island indigenous stuff because that's not what I do, right? Like it's not my lane to teach Turtle Island indigenous history, right? I'm totally down with here's some more, tools in the arsenal, but I'm definitely not down for teaching Turtle Island indigenous history. So, yeah. But I need to. Thank you, Alan. But yeah, for me, that's really what it is. So let's go ahead. We seem to be pretty calm, so I think that we can probably leave the comments on a little bit. Maybe not. I absolutely agree. I'm not sure about the dinosaurs, but I do believe the megalofauna, and I know we were giants. I agree with that 100%. But hey, Subtle, decoration. How do you choose to decorate yourself? Crushing it, and I'm not sure what you're crushing. Are you a crush unit? Crushing your own balls? I mean, how do you decorate yourself? Yes. So I'm not going to go into Neanderthal funeral rites right now. What we're talking about tonight is specifically different species within Neanderthals, and then we're going to touch now on language and some evidence of stuff we see in the language within Neanderthals. We will be discussing next week, the end of this week, the start of next week. We will be discussing. Sorry, my brain will blank at times. So we'll be discussing art and jewelry within Neanderthals at the end of this week and the start of next week. So, um, I don't. So I believe I think that when all the evidence plays out, we will see that the Cerruti Mastodon site, that does not have any bones associated with it, is a speciation of Homo erectus here in Turtle Island, because we see Homo erectus mated everywhere, and the Cerruti Mastodon site would actually be a Homo erectus or a speciation of Homo erectus site. Homo sapien wasn't out of the Levant yet. So I do believe that once all said and done, and once the proof is in the pudding, that the giants that have been found in Turtle Island throughout history are going to be that species. But there's no name species, there's no anything right now. I just, when I know the true histories of what the indigenous histories are, when I see the archaeological record, and when I know what's happened in the past of the archaeological record, I truly believe that when all pans out, that will be our giant species. Island giganticism is why Turtle Island has a bunch of megafauna, and island dwarfism and island giganticism is why Homo florensis is so small and Homo luzonensis is so small. So that would make sense too. And it's not a conspiracy. And like I said, I do believe when all the evidence pans out, that's what we're going to see. So when we're looking at, okay, so we're going to go ahead and turn that off. Again, if you would like to ask questions, I'm over in YouTube, and over on YouTube, the comments are on. And Widda Ord, without the periods, um, we are going to look next at language within Homo Neanderthal. Homo Neanderthalis, who is behind me, Homo Neanderthal, done by Tom Borkland. Tom Borkland does fantastic art. You can find him on Twitter and on Insta, couple other places. Uh, his art is just amazing and beautiful. This Homo Neanderthalis rendition behind me, I think, is gorgeous. I like with his art, like I do with all of the arts that I use, the fact that you're seeing the humanity of the species, because the truth is that we're looking at humans. Homo means human, right? We're looking at other humans. With Neanderthals, we know that Neanderthals were here 300,000 years, which is long as we've been here currently, when we arrive on the scene 300,000 years ago, and that they don't not die off until 30,000 years ago. But we don't see that there's a lot of evidence of different things too far back. Like our earliest cave art that we see is about 65,000 years ago in France. And we know that this is Homo neanderthalis because Homo sapien is not in France at this time. And there's been a couple of newer finds that might push those dates back just a little bit, but I'm not quite sure how far. Like, it's not a whole lot, just a little bit, a couple thousand years, a couple tens of thousand years. But we do see, our earliest cave art within them, and we do see our earliest burials within them. Well, not anymore. Sorry, Homo naledi changed that, exponentially changed that. But we used to see our oldest burials within Neanderthal. So with Homo neanderthalis, we also see that these things correlate with brain changes that also correlate with the malleability and the changing in the brain, right? But we see that predating Neanderthal, language is something that we're seeing in Homo species. We see that Homo erectus has language. And what I mean by language is verbal, spoken, syllabic language, okay? And I specify this because everything has language. They have proven that trees will communicate with each other through their root systems, and that they have matriarchal families, and that entire forests are nations. So everything communicates. The grass communicates, the dog communicates, the cat communicates, the bird communicates, the human communicates, right? But Verbal, spoken, syllabic language starts with Homo erectus. And how we know this is we see it in the patterning of the brain on the base of the skull. Your brain leaves these imprints on the inside of your skull as it presses against your skull. And in that imprint on the inside of your skull, we're seeing that you're getting that patterning of language in this portion down here in the skull. The other thing that you're seeing is that the chest development and the lung capacity gives the evidence of language in Homo erectus. This evidence comes from the fact that the way that we express air through our voice box directly correlates, hello, gorgeous child of mine, directly correlates with our lung capacity and the way we expel the air with our chests, with the muscles, the rib cage, with the lungs, right? This directly correlates with the syllabic portion of moving through the voice box, correct? So, with this, we see that in the chest capacity and the way the lungs are on Homo erectus and in the base of the skull, the patterning of the brain, we see that they have language. We also see this in Neanderthal, but we didn't decide this in Neanderthal until 2013. No, wait a minute. Let me pull it back up because I had it here the other day and we were talking about it and I need to pull it back up. Very, very recently. This was one that was huge to me. This was one of my favorite things because of the fact that up until this moment, we really thought that Neanderthal were just this grunting species. 2013. No, 2015. So in 2015, they find a hyoid. And the hyoid that they find gives us the information that Neanderthal actually has the ability for verbal language. Before this, we didn't believe that. Now we can see this in the patterning of the brain on the skull and in the capacity of lungs as well. But this again comes with those advancements of science, those advancements of understanding of science. I think I chipped my tooth in talking. Those advancements with understandings in science. And as we see this, we see that this language correlation within Homo neanderthalis might have actually give evidence of our earliest example of written documentation. We have a bone that we have that has scrapings, fine marks on it, that the tool marks of them are deliberately cut. And the way that the markings are uniform. And so this seems to be like there's a couple of different types to the marking. Like it's not the same, but the way that they are, there's several that are uniform and the way that they are, right? Gives suggestion of accounting, like documenting of something. This documentation would be our earliest form of language. This is in Neanderthals, and this is 50,000 years ago. This would be just amazing to be able to understand that Neanderthal have written language 50,000 years before we think we see written language in Homo sapiens. Because it should be understood that we have written language in Homo sapiens in Egypt with the hieroglyphs before we have written language everywhere else that we know of. And the first parts of those written language that we see are actually chiseled into a cliff. In fact, the very earliest of hieroglyphs that we see is the name of King Scorpion with a cartouche around the scorpion. And so what we are seeing is that the earliest form of writing that we see currently ourselves in Homo sapiens is in ancient Egypt. And I think that that one is 8,000 years ago. I'd have to double check my dating on that. And what we're seeing with it is that it is the documentation of a name. It's an accounting, right? It's a recording. It's a record. We see the same thing with cuneiform, which is what we consider to be our first written language, though let's be real, cuneiform is not, hieroglyphs predate cuneiform. We've just decided that cuneiform more closely represents us and its Greek thought process, right? It comes in the Levant area, and therefore it's a positive Western thought, right? Um, all of these are things that we see because of the fact that they are put into actual stone or clay, right? They're put into something that is indelible, something that is going to keep, something that you're going to see long term, right? Otzi has tattoos at 8,000 years ago in France, right? No, the Alps. Is Otzi the Alps? Anyways, he has tattoos, and some of those tattoos are pictures, like the reindeer. But some of those tattoos are dots and dashes along the meridian lines and points of his body that actually correlate to where acupuncture is used today. And these tattoos are actually done with herbs. Like they cooked the herb and then, or, like burnt the herb and then used the ash and the herb to do the tattoo ink, right? Um, But could dots and dashes actually be like early hieroglyphics, early runic, right? Like, could these be things that actually correlate with writing as well as acupunctural and medicinal points, right? Often early runic stuff, often early written stuff has a tendency to correlate spiritually. We see with the Druids, with the ancient Celts, that they had a writing system. They had Ogham, but they didn't record anything in Ogham. Ogham wasn't used for that. Ogham wasn't used for histories. Ogham wasn't used for things like that. Ogham was used for communication, right? Maybe a marking of territory. We're not quite sure. We've only got a few Ogham stones, right? But it was not used for recording in the way that, hello, gorgeous. Oh, I love that picture, White Star. Um, it's not used for recording in the way that its written languages were used elsewhere for recording. So we also see in Turtle Island indigenous people that they have pictographic written language that documents seasons, that documents calendars, that documents events, right? We see the Mayans, right, which have this extensively beautiful language that nobody's ever been able to really figure out, right? Um, well, I mean, the Mayan people who are still there, but that extensive writing that we don't want to equate as writing. So, writing in Homo sapiens could absolutely go back a lot further than we like to think it goes. It just wasn't on something that's going to last like stone until later on. Remember that stone tools are what we see in the fossil record, but we know that other tools exist. Having stone tools, doesn't mean that you don't have a bladder bag that you're using to carry water or a leaf for a cup. Having stone tools are going to be found in the fossil record, but you're not going to find the, piece of wood that's been used as a plate, right? You're not going to see these other tools within the fossil record, but they are still there. They're still a part of society. We see evidence of them, like we see clothing, right? We see evidence of clothing, but we don't see the actual tools themselves because they've degraded. Like we don't see the actual clothing itself because it's degraded, right? So we're probably going to find more information as we do this DNA testing on basically core samples, right? We might find that, oh, this, but again, a lot of that also comes with knowing the provenance, which means knowing what's going on. So if I'm digging it out of the ground, I can't see unless I'm recording each layer as I go. Like I can't tell that the layer with the animal DNA is right against the layer with the human DNA, right? I'd have to be able to really, really be able to fine tune that, which is not something you can do as much, right? You can tell that they're all living together, but telling that they're actually dressed by animal skins is going to be a lot harder, right? From a DNA perspective on, especially on core samples, right? So What we see with Neanderthals is not only do they have a verbal syllabic language, but it's quite possible that they have a written accountic language as well, which again would give us this written accountic language way earlier than we're currently assessing it as, because currently, thank you, doesn't it? Um, because currently we're assessing it as coming around much later. Again, a lot of this is the fact that unless we think it fits into our Western criteria for something, we don't count it as anything. We don't count it as something that's real unless it fits into our Western perspective. And not only do we not count it, but we discount it and we cover it up, right? We hide it. It's like a cat in a litter box. So we're scratching some gravel over that to make sure that nobody sees it. And we absolutely see that time and time again, especially within archaeology and early anthropology and archaeology, right? So, as we're getting into this space where we're listening more to indigenous voices and Black voices in the US and indigenous voices around the globe, no matter where they are or what color their skin is, we're seeing that this movement forward of understanding is really making this great shift in our understanding of Neanderthals and this great shift in our understanding of early humans and this great shift in our understanding that early humans are actually advanced as you are, right? They don't have this lacking that we want to think that they have. They're not this actual like primitive grunting species. It's a species that has advanced language and apparently maybe writing and advanced art and burial and all of these beautiful things in a time when we don't have them. In fact, evidence is that we don't have them first. Neanderthal has all of them first and kind of teaches us them. Thank you. I'm assuming pretty that you're Prudy. That's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're over here. And thank you. I got this one off of Etsy. It's like linen and it's all like tie dye with print and it's all like a Celtic. And I wear it as I go Viking most of the time. Like that's the kind of style of clothing I wear is Viking just for fun. That and it hides me and it makes me pretty masculine, so I don't have to deal with shit. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn comments on back on in TikTok. Um, That's pretty much the conversation on this, though, on the DNA portion of it and on the portion having to do with language within Neanderthals. We can't really tell what their language was, you know. Uh, we can correlate that it was probably similar to the early languages that we have, like Kosan is considered to be the original language group, like the earliest, excuse me, the earliest language group. Um, and so you can see that, it's probably more along those lines. So you're probably looking at something that has more clicks in it. You're going to see that this happens because you're hearing the world around you. You're not just talking to your fellow humans, you're talking to your fellow beings, right? So if you hear the birds sing or you hear the chitter of the katydids, right? You're going to grab those little things and hear those little sounds and be a part of the world around you. For one thing, you don't want to disrupt too much. If you disrupt too much, then you alert predators and you alert prey, right? So you don't want to disrupt too much. And for the other, it is example. It's example. And you're taking the example of the world around you, right? Thank you, thank you. I'd rather talk to a murder of crows, honestly, most of the time. The back talk that you get's probably going to be more intelligent, right? I do wonder what Neanderthal music and singing was like. I do think that we have some evidence of early actual musical instruments. I have to go and look again before I say that, though, because it might be early Homo sapien musical instruments that I'm seeing in my head. Um, but we have like a lot of vocal music throughout the globe, right? We have a lot of spaces where just vocalization becomes music, right? Swedish keening, right? Um, Norwegian groups will do like all vocalization, and you'll hear different modularizations at different levels that combine to create this whole powerful song, right? And so there's a lot of singing and a lot of music that we can do pre-instrument, right? Throat singing, absolutely. Even things like the didgeridoo are an extension of that vocalization, right? Those are really cool. Of Neanderthal, yes, this is kind of, like, I mean, you're only seeing really his chest, but this is a representation. Neanderthal are going to be shorter. They're going to be stockier. The skin is going to be lighter than Homo sapiens at the time, though not the white that we think of Northern European. And they're going to be short and stocky and broad, very heavy chested, barrel chested, and very muscular. There are no new reports on giant bones being found. That was not what I was saying. Sorry if it came across that way. What I was saying was is there are reports throughout history of giant bones being found that are now missing. There's archaeological reports and finds throughout the globe, actually. Even Herodotus records giant bones being found. But uh, they ended up going home to people's private collections because early archaeology is grave robbers. But there are still some journal articles written by archaeologists and anthropologists. We can't do anything about it really until, well, there's probably some buried in some museum somewhere. I'm sure that, like Jeffersonian probably has a couple, but I know that there's a record of 27 being found in North America. And that's 7 to 9 feet tall, usually with giants, is the records of skeletal finds. Your idea of what savage is skewed and disgusting. And I would have to say that the people that were called savages here in Turtle Island were the ones that were civilized, and it was the Europeans who were truly savage because it is savage to kill babies. That's savage. Welcome from Oklahoma. Welcome back, daughter. Scientific theory is something that's based on fact, and all of my stuff has scientific journal sources. It's in the link tree in my bio. Awesome elms. I don't think that we have I don't think that we have a whole lot of understanding. Yes, absolutely. Hold on a second. Let me actually get that set up. No, Earl. I'm sorry. I'm writing. I've been writing all week actually. And so I haven't done any research this week because I'm actually I did the video I did today because as I was writing this morning on a whole new subject than what I'm supposed to be finishing up to publish at the end of the week, um, I ended up with a thought process that went, oh, okay, I have to double check that. That looks interesting. Oh, fuck, I know that I can do this. Invite people. Homo neanderthal was never in Africa. My content is paleoanthropology currently. I'm not even sure what that one is. I put up a new Discord link in the link tree in the bio. It's at the top. I think that it will only be viable for 7 days, and I'll go ahead and put up a new one after that. Homo neanderthal involves in Europe and Eurasia. Homo sapien was not more cruel than Neanderthal at the time, and it's not so much that we took over. We have Homo neanderthalis within us. Uh, Chicky, um, I started in medicine and I went into anthropology. I've been doing medicine, archaeology, and anthropology pretty much most of my life. It's how I learned to read. And studied indigenous medicine as a child and practiced indigenous medicine until after the military when I got into modern medicine. Um, so I then got a degree in archaeology and I teach shit just because I think that education shouldn't be kept behind a $40,000 a year paywall and get kept behind really huge language. And I really, really have some things that I think that people would love to know. And so I'm trying to get that information out because I think that people would love it. And it's important, especially when we look at where we're at as a species currently and what it's causing for us as a species. It is pretty. I think you just set a thirst trap in my friggin' chat. Thank you, beautiful. They do evolve from the Erectus population in Europe. Neanderthal does. Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, Marianne, if you're living for 25 years in the Hawaiian Islands, I hope that, and by the way that you phrase your sentence, I believe that you absolutely are seeing that you're in occupied territory and that Indigenous Hawaiians should have autonomy over Hawaii. Uh, The that's a Homo sapien. A black man is something in America, dude. Like African men are dark of skin, yes, but they're not necessarily a black man any more than you're a white man. Um, you're European. Your skin might be white, but that's only a genetic mutation that comes from an adaptation and is not an advantage. So what was the common ancestor as Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergensis, which is a subspecies of Homo erectus. Graciopithecus, Graciopithecus ferengi is what they think is the missing link between between hominins and chimpanzees. The between all the hominin species and the chimp species, pan species, or tribe, hominin tribe and pan tribe. Yeah, I was assuming positive intent, but I wasn't exactly sure, Decray. I was hoping. Do I notice current species splitting with higher order thinking demonstration? No, no. Our species isn't splitting, isn't changing into anything as different species. Our species is evolving. I'm not sure if it's advancing. This is definitely not an advancement. True to myself, maybe I know what you mean, but it didn't really seem like I knew what you meant. So, yeah, I would do cray. I don't like the word savage. The word savage is a slur. You really should not be using it, you know, especially when it is attributed to a kind and gentle, as documented by the people killing them, group of people, right? Absolutely. The thing in my nose is personal decoration. Do you think that you should govern my personal decoration? It's also religious, spirituality, ancestral connection. You know, we have been doing this shit And this shit for Neanderthals. Neanderthals were painting their bodies and piercing their bodies, and we have been tattooing for at least 35,000 years in France. So, live it up. We're supposed to be decorating ourselves. That's in fact, we will get into this as we speak later this week about cave art and about jewelry and decoration. A big part of us as humans is our ability to express ourselves. Like that's one of the things that's really innate about us or unique about us. Like it's one of those things that really is only us. You don't see a lot of other beings that are able to really decorate themselves. You do see some, right? But to the point and the extent that we do, you don't see any. And we absolutely adapt our bodies. We do so much as to like force shape our feet into painful things, slit our noses, wrap bands around our necks, turn our heads into really elongated skulls. We have done so many weird and fascinating and wonderful things to decorate our bodies since we were Neanderthals. That's about who we are. It advertises, it tells everybody, look at me and see who I am. Don't mistake me, see who I am. And that's what why we decorate ourselves. So, my favorite culture creation story. I love the star people creation stories. And I love the sky woman creation stories. I think the best. I'm not white, but thank you. I just have light skin. This one is not a sapien in Britain 10,000 years ago. This behind me is Homo neanderthalis. Just so we know. We do come from the stars or from the sky. So I love creation stories, but for me, I don't subscribe to creation stories. My idea of a creation story is just, eh, I think we're all a pink ball of floating energy. And that when three synapses is fired here, consciousness is formed. And three synapses is fired here, consciousness is formed. And when three synapses is fired here, consciousness was born. And once you hit three, it becomes majority. And at that point, the whole of it is formed. And I believe we're basically like a hollow deck. Right. But I think Stardust explains it too. Like, and I think Dust explains it. And I think the moats explain it. And I think the collective explains it. And I think the falling from another space explains it. And I think the washing up out of the sea explains it. I think so many things. So many things. Neanderthal isn't a race, it's a species, and race doesn't exist. The theory of race has been debunked. Culture and ethnicity exists, but race does not. Racism exists, it's pretty structural across the globe, but race theory was created by the anthropological community and has been debunked by the anthropological community. Wouldn't you like to be a fish swimming around all day in the sea? Or would you rather be? Yeah. I don't think we have a lot. So let's go ahead. And I think that really we only have Ducray in here tonight. And I can't really turn it on to subscribers only for some reason. I'm not sure why. Again, if you would like to go over to YouTube, you can comment over there. It's that little extra step that keeps the trolls down. Um, it's in Widda Ord over there. I'm not going to stay on too much longer. We will be back on what is tonight? Sunday. We'll back on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I might move around my Sunday live because I did not realize that I think we had talked about it, but I totally my head spaced that my child goes live before me, and so I want to make sure that I'm in her lives and helping mod her lives. And so um I might move Sunday evenings back a bit or move it to Monday evening. I'm not sure yet. But currently, I will be back Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we will be on the same subject. Tuesday morning, and then we will be on the same subject Wednesday night. And then Friday morning, we will start a new subject. And the next subject that we will be starting will be decoration of body and art in the home of Neanderthals. You too, pretty. Thank you so much. And I have to say, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your energy and just how much beauty and joy you bring with you every time you step into my space. Thank you so much, Purdy. Yay, Marianne. Awesome. So we will be moving on Friday, but we will have two more lives on this subject. Yeah, yeah, and that's the reason why I tend to keep the comments off on TikTok. It's just that it's a little bit I want to make sure people can ask questions, right? And it was a little bit less trolly tonight, so I left them on a little bit longer than I probably should. um, so we will be talking again on Tuesday about speech and about DNA. I am almost done with a I wanted to say thesis, and it's not the thesis. Treatise on the right to life, and I will be publishing a treatise on the right to life this by the end of this week. And the treatise on the right to life I will be publishing. I will be publishing on Amazon, and I will be publishing it for free. I am going to ask that everybody who follows me and wants more content from me go over there and grab it for free and boost it up. And we can maybe see if we can get more people understanding. I don't do a lot of political stuff in TikTok because doing politics in TikTok gets me banned. We saw that early on and it keeps getting me banned. I am on an account warning. I spend my time on live bans, not a live ban for doing makeup. Anyways, politics on TikTok gets me banned, so this will be a political outlet. And so I will be doing a treatise on the right to life. If you are in my Discord channel, I am asking for help looking through it. Tell me what works for you and what doesn't. So if you're in my Discord, you have an opportunity to kind of pre-see things as I'm working on them. Pretty, are you in my Discord? Red Scare, I like that name. That's awesome. Let me actually, I can post it in here, I think. Yes. That's my Discord. You guys should grab it. Yes, single mom life. I have a lot of theories on why humans are so violent. Uh, about 10,000 years ago is when we start to see our first god kings. And when we start to see our first god kings, what we start to see is our first stratification of society. In this stratification of society, what we see is the need for one group of people to maintain power by forcing submission on another group of people. And we see the start of land ownership. Before that, we see territory like we see in all animals, but territory wasn't the idea of owning the land. It's the idea of coming here and taking what I need in this time and making sure that other people are taking, right? It's not the vast fighting that we think of, right? And so when they get to the concept of land ownership and they have this concept of land ownership combined with the stratification of society that maintains power from the top to the bottom, you see othering start. Because if I can convince you that it is the person in the hills that's coming to steal your grain instead of me stealing your grain when I am, then I can not only convince you to give me your grain so I can give it to the soldiers to protect you from the people in the hills when really the soldiers are protecting me from you, but I can also convince you that the people in the hills are the problem and not me. And so we see the start of othering by the hills peoples as opposed to the cities peoples. We then see it translate into my nation against your nation, and then we see it translate into religion. And then after the landing of Europeans in Turtle Island, we see it turn into race. But again, the earliest violence that we see in the archaeological record is a massacre in Kenya 10,000 years ago. And it's 8 people. One of whom was pregnant and tied into a sitting position. No teens or older children. And no older teens or, no younger teens or older children, but there are young children and old people. So it's assumed that they massacred everybody but took any teens or young older children with them. Um, oh, that's Discord pretty. It's like this chat thing that you can do. It's like a chat channel, but you'd have to download something. We're friends in I follow you, I think. So let me message you. I'll find you in TikTok and I'll give you a different way to contact me so that you can contact me through something else because I'm not very tech savvy either. So I totally understand that. Um, I do have I have Insta, which you can find through my link tree, but I also have Facebook that I don't give out to a whole lot of people. It's where all my indigenous people are is on Facebook. Um, it's all family and indigenous people, so I'll give you my Facebook. I don't typically just like randomly give it out. Oh, okay, perfect, perfect. I don't want my Facebook to kind of translate into the public sphere thing, and so like I keep the Facebook private. Facebook can be such a nightmare, anyways. But I'm so technologically stunted. Absolutely, single mom, and, I've done a couple of things on it, but really so everybody's like, "Oh, we killed off Neanderthals." Homo sapiens or the book Sapiens comes out with this theory that I saw in a documentary that we killed the Neanderthals based on a singular bone that has a singular what they say looks like a sharp point impact, but as a radiographer does not look like a sharp point impact. It looks like a cat tooth impact maybe or like a sharper point impact, but not like an actual pinpoint of a spearhead or an arrowhead, which they're claiming it's an arrowhead and they're claiming it's sapien attacking Neanderthal because it's obviously an arrow and Neanderthals didn't use bows and arrows. Well, first of all, nobody used bows and arrows. They used atlatls. They didn't use bows and arrows at this time. And atlatls, there is some evidence that Neanderthals could use atlatls. So it doesn't say anything. And again, it's not a sharp point impact. It looks more to me, if it's a point impact, that it would be like a saber-toothed tiger or, like a fang impact, than it would be like a sharp point because the depression is shallow and broad. And a sharp point impact is not going to have a shallow and broad depression in it, not even in its remodeling, because outside of that, you can see the lip of remodeling around this shallow and broad depression, which does not indicate sharp point impact. Um, and that is their evidence of Homo sapien killing out Homo neanderthalis. So I don't believe that they killed out Homo neanderthal, but they might have. There would be no evidence of it. It would have to be like something really big and really thing. It all evidence points more to breeding with them, right? All evidence points more to there being more Neanderthal DNA on the planet today than there ever was during the time of their existence. And if there's more Neanderthal DNA on the planet today than there ever was during the time of their existence, they're not extinct. They just don't have a genomic hole present, but they're still here. We are admixture upon admixture upon admixture, every single one of us. Not only are we admixture from other species, but it's not like we ever like isolated ourselves in one space. There's constantly a migration of thought and genetics and people and styles and new ideas, right? There's a constant, that's what makes us human, that constantly looking over the next horizon, that constant curiosity, and that constant looking at somebody else and going, "Ooh, you're pretty. Hey, I like that heavy brow ridge. Bring it over here." Right? Like we always see something unusual and we go, "Oh, that looks cute." There's never in our lives really that we have saw something unusual and go, "Ew, gross." Usually it's, "Ooh, I don't understand that. I want to understand it a little bit more." We even use this in phrasing like opposites attract, right? It is our standard thought that we're attracted to that which is not like us, that it balances us, that it keeps us going. So makes total sense. Thank you, Emery. Nice. Yay, there's more people over on YouTube tonight than there usually are. Um, but I think that when we look at these species, what we have to see is a species that is so like us. They live in their comfortable homes, which they have decorated. They talk in language. They have written communication. They have clothing. They have fire. They have beautiful tools. They have beautiful ornamentation. They have comfortable living spaces for the time, right? We may not view them that way, but they didn't view them as uncomfortable. We didn't think that we were all going to have cell phones in 1950, right? In 1950, the miracle was the telephone in your home and the TV, right? In 1950, nobody could have foreseen that they were going to be hand holding their TV in 50 years. And so in 1950, they didn't long for a handheld TV. They were ecstatic by the color TV in their living room. Neanderthals were ecstatic by the light that the fire plays on the wall. They were content, not because they were primitive, but because they weren't primitive. Because the idea that you're striving for more should be exploiting others is in fact pretty primitive. Whereas your idea that in bettering yourself and your surroundings, you're also bettering the surroundings of the other beings around you is advanced. And we see that this is what Neanderthals did, just like all early Homo sapiens, before we get to that 10,000-year-old idea of othering and ownership. All brought to you by narcissistic god kings who want to maintain power. I'm going to go ahead and open up comments and TikTok for a couple minutes, and I'm going to go ahead and take off for the night. Again, I will be back Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Yay, Dan. Nighty night, guys. Hey, Ducray, don't be sorry for anything, man. There's like one of you trying to, and you're trying to judge who to. Please don't. Please don't. Tom Borkland art is the name of this artist who did this one. Please don't feel bad, sweetheart. You have no reason to feel bad. Black Lagoon, I don't randomly PM people. There's a couple of question videos, I think, set up on my thing that you can ask. And the one that says follow me back, you can ask questions there. But I'm not going to just randomly PM people so that they can randomly shoot questions at me. Like, that's a lot of time and effort for me, right? Like, thank you. Thank you. Here in America, we are mixed with everything around the world because our DNA, if not mistaken. Well, everybody is pretty mixed with a lot of different things. All over the world, we're all very mixed. But yes, there is a lot of mixture of modern populations. So there's a lot of mixture of populations within the last 500 years, but it's not like those populations weren't already mixed. Oh, you're fine, subtle. I'm not sure. Oh, you mean the subscription? Please don't. Yeah, I I appreciate all the subscribers so much, but I don't want anybody to feel like they need to. I really appreciate it though. Trying to do DNA with more recent groups that are uncontacted, are in secluded gene pools is extremely difficult. And the reason is that first of all, like if you're looking at groups here in Turtle Island, you're looking at groups that know the cost of contact with Europeans and know the cost of giving their DNA to Europeans, giving anything of themselves to Europeans. And so the likelihood of them doing that decreases significantly depending on the group, right? Depending on the level of cost they've already played or their level of seclusion to avoid that cost, right? Oh, nice, subtle. Cool. How many generations ago did we start looking like modern humans? So, Homo sapien, us, this facial structure, this starts at about 300,000 years ago. The skull structure comes into play fully at about 40,000 years ago. Oh, the server. Okay, sorry. Okay, yeah, I'll talk to you over there. So when you're sending me messages, it doesn't you need to directly message me maybe because like when you're trying to send me messages, it sends me this whole big thing and it's like the same big thing every time and then it sends me to some weird channel and I don't even know where I'm at or how to answer it. And there's nothing in this channel that sends me to. I actually messaged in the channel this time. So I'll talk to you more about it. Um I'm not sure what the chalice and the blade is, Marianne. Like it sounds familiar, but I'm not sure what it is, Marianne. I'm sorry. Okay, everybody, I am going to go ahead and take off. Much love. I will see you guys all Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard. If you are on my Discord channel, we can, or if you want to help with some of the stuff that I'm doing or anything like that. But I will be publishing by the end of the week. And so we will have the first of the, I think Chalice and the Blade is a book. I just don't remember what it is. Like, I think it's a, I don't remember. But I will be publishing by the end of the week, and it'll be a political statement on a tree disease on the right to life. Have a great one, everybody. Much love, much love. Good night, good night, good night. Maybe if I could figure out stuffs. And then everybody over on YouTube, thank you so much for coming over. Not that I know of all in the same. To my knowledge, we're not seeing. So there are averages in specific groups, but there's not specifics in specific groups. And I'm not sure on this on that group, but I do know that there's some specific groups that do have problems with dentition, like, uh, and it's a genetic thing. It all has to do with the family lines, right? It all has to do with their family lines. Much love, everybody. I will see you guys Tuesday morning.